is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host today, Cody Williams, content director at fansided.com. Buhler and I are giving each other a little break. I will be traveling at the end of next or throughout next week, and he will be covering Solo Like a Cup. And our schedules, we had a hard time aligning them for this Monday episode of the show. So I'm going Solo Like a Cup. Sounds good. I don't have much else to say. It's been pretty quiet, somewhat. We'll get into some of the non-quiet things since Indiana won the national championship, but let's get it going. And let's start with our first segment today, which is, of course, first and 15, talk portal to me. And we're going to start with some of the drama before we get into one of my bigger points. We're going to start with the Darian Mensah-Miami drama. Duke continues to try to take every legal avenue that they can to sue Darian Mensah for breaching his contract to essentially and reportedly go to the Miami Hurricanes to join them. For Miami, I understand why you're in on this move. Yes, tampering's rampant in college football. We know all of these things, but if it's going to happen, try to take advantage of it and use it to your advantage if you're a program. Miami's trying to do that. And everything I've read to this point seems like Duke would probably be better off settling this suit than they would be continuing to fight this. That obviously Duke has plenty of legal representation, plenty of funds to be able to do this. But at the same time, we're in an era of college sports and college football where player empowerment seems to be kind of the chief the soup du jour, let's call it. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change because Duke sues Darian Mensah. I don't think Duke and Darian Mensah are going to be the people to make that kind of change. So the more and more I look at this situation, it does kind of seem like Duke is fighting a losing battle in the end. And ultimately, I think they're just going to lose Darian Mensah. And it just kind of depends on how much damage they're going to take in doing so, how much they're going to potentially hurt their reputation if it were to affect Mensah's eligibility as he tries to go to a new school. You know, there's a lot of factors at play here, and it could end up as a black mark on the resume of the Duke Blue Devils program and Manny Diaz's program if they were to continue this legal fight. So again, the writing kind of seems to be on the wall that they do need to settle. We'll see what happens there. Another big moment in the transfer portal, and also in the same vein of tampering. If you haven't seen Dabo Swinney's 8-minute long rant on Pete Golding and Ole Miss trying to tamper with linebacker and Cal transfer Luke Farrelly, it's one for the ages. Let me pull up this quote just so I can make sure I get this right. Don't want to misquote the Clemson head coach here. But he was Dabo's not one to mince words normally, and he's one to go on a tangent. He's one to avoid the question, sure, but when he's got a point that he wants to make, he makes it. And he did not hold back. This is kind of the money quote from it, though. Hold on, let me start with this. He alleged that Golding texted Farrelly, "I know you're signed, but what is your buyout?" Which is the definition of tampering, like as clear cut as it gets. Like, I understand that you are under contract. What would it take for me to get you out of that contract? That's tampering. That's as tampering gets. Again, there are no guardrails right now in the transfer portal. That's why so many people get up in arms about this stuff. But that is tampering in its purest form, if that is what happened. Again, I'm sure the NCAA will investigate this, which leads us to Dabo Swinney's quote. "I'm not going to let someone flat out tamper with my program. If you tamper with my players, I'm going to turn you in. There's a lot more I can say, but I'm going to let the NCAA do its job." And he was not kind to Golding or to the Ole Miss program. He basically insinuated, people expect this from Pete Golding, which is not strong. That's certainly some very pointed comments there. Um, but I do think that it's interesting to hear these comments from Dabo given his prior reluctance, and I would say still lingering reluctance to use the transfer portal. It would be different if a head coach who is normally very portal heavy were making these comments. They might ring a little differently, but Dabo's still largely trying to go with an old school approach to building his Clemson roster. Whether or not that's smart, that's an entirely different discussion entirely. Entirely. Let's say it again, just for the hell of it. But that's whether or not that's good is irrelevant though. Like it really comes down to the fact that if they want like at a certain point the transfer portal does need some guardrails. At a certain point we do have to curb the way things are being handled, the way business is being done in the transfer portal right now with NIL dollars, with tampering, with all of the above. It's going to take prominent voices like Dabo Swinney doing things like this, stepping up and saying things for change to happen in that regard. Again, I'm all for paying players. I think that NIL is actually great for the sport. I think it, but I, at the same time, I'm not dumb enough or naive enough to think that this can go on almost entirely unregulated. That's not sustainable. That's going to lead to something that, frankly, is probably beyond my comprehension in terms of what it could mean for the sport. But I do know it could start to dissolve the sport as we know it. That's when you start to talk about the lack of guardrails, that's when you start to see super conferences truly start to take shape. That's when you start to see potential breakoffs or almost like semi professionalization of the sport start to take off. There needs to be guardrails. And again, it's rich coming from Dabo, given his propensity to, for lack of a better word, shit on the transfer portal in previous years. But I do think it takes a prominent voice like his to really start trying to get the wheels motion to change. I'm not saying that's going to come quickly. I'm also not naive enough to think that. But I do think it is something that if we start to hear more coaches of Swinney's caliber, of Dabo's caliber and platform, then we will start to see some sort of meaningful change. And the last thing I want to talk about the transfer portal is the antithesis of Dabo Swinney, and that's the portal king, Lane Kiffin, down in Baton Rouge. And Lane Kiffin is he's not stopping now that he's at LSU. Not that we thought that was going to be the case with the resources that the Tigers have, with the resources and the caliber of program that LSU is. We knew they were going to be a force in the transfer portal, no doubt about that. And boy, are they coming full force. Jordan Seaton, the top rank, he was previously the top unsigned transfer, top five in most of the composite rankings for the transfer portal. Formerly of Colorado, offensive tackle, headed to LSU. As is Sam Levitt, as is Trey Wilson. It's the number one ranked portal class in the country. I don't think LSU is going in. I think LSU is going to have a big season. I think when you look at the SEC landscape, there's like part of this is just this is Lane Kiffin doing what he's obviously proven he's very good at Ole Miss, getting Ole Miss to the playoff with a roster largely built through the portal, getting consistently having top ranked portal classes. But at LSU, this feels like a kind of a not only that, but also going for it in a year where yes, Georgia and Texas are going to be very, very good. Uh, is Alabama? How good is Oklahoma? How much did John Mateer and the Oklahoma offense improve? Vanderbilt's probably going to pull back. Um, Texas A&M, kind of still in a prove it stage to some degree after, losing the regular season finale to Texas and then losing in the college football playoff to Miami, scoring only 3 points in that game. Like, I feel like there is a window of opportunity for LSU coming into the 2026 season to kind of take advantage of that. And based on Lane Kiffin's portal haul, it seems like he's doing exactly that. And what I'm going to do is move on to our next segment, which is He Coming. And that's another big time program that we're going to be talking about, and that's the Ohio State Buckeyes, because Arthur Smith is coming to be their offensive coordinator. Formerly the Steelers offensive coordinator, most recently under Mike Tomlin. Obviously, with Tomlin resigning, stepping down, whatever you want to call it, whatever term you want to use, whatever they want to say in Pittsburgh. With Mike Tomlin no longer being the coach of the Steelers, Arthur Smith was looking for a job. Lo and behold, he's going to Columbus. And I'm intrigued by this because we praised Matt Patricia for his NFL complexities, his NFL scheme on defense for most of the season. Obviously, didn't work out in the college football playoff, but I still think that defense was pretty damn good. And part of it was the talent, part of it was the schemes and the schematics. You think about the last time that, we saw a Ryan Day in this program hire a former NFL offensive coordinator. That'd be Chip Kelly, and that'd be in 2024 season when they hired him from being UCLA's head coach, which that seemed to be what Chip Kelly wanted to do more than anything. And they won a national championship. I don't know if you remember. So there's a formula here. I think that Arthur Smith, it might not be the most exciting offense in the world, but I'll be damned if he hasn't had some success. He was coordinating those offenses in Tennessee when Tennessee was making runs to the AFC Championship game under Mike Vrabel, which obviously Vrabel had a very large hand in that. But there's a reason Smith has been getting head coaching interviews in the NFL. There's a reason that Smith became a head coach after working in Tennessee. Didn't work out, obviously, in Atlanta, but he is a well-respected guy. The factor in this that is super interesting, um, we've talked about it and joked about it, Bueller and I, before. Arthur Smith is obviously the son of the founder of FedEx. So, that's not an insignificant amount of money going on in that family. If we're going to talk about NIL, if we're going to talk about paying players, there are worse things than having FedEx money behind you. I'm not in like I'm not saying necessarily that Arthur Smith is going to be donating that money. Obviously, that would be questionable at best. But if Arthur Smith called his father, called the corporation, and said, "Hey, what if we got some NIL deals with FedEx going on in Columbus, Ohio?" It's a nice way to make a pretty penny. Nice way to get some people coming to Ohio State and maybe changing their mind a little bit, maybe increasing the talent pool further. Like Ohio State doesn't have trouble recruiting. They're the Ohio State effing Buckeyes. Like let's be clear about that. But I do think that ultimately getting Arthur Smith in there is big on several fronts for the Buckeyes moving forward. Potentially financially, but more importantly, I think just getting that kind of pro style culture, that experience as a play caller, because that was one of me and Bueller's biggest things with Brian Hartline is there was limited experience as an offensive coordinator and play caller, and more than the limited experience, the little experience that we did see wasn't particularly impressive. So getting Arthur Smith in there kind of matches with Matt Patricia a little bit better, and I kind of like where the Buckeyes are heading after this hire. Again, it's not the most exciting hire in the world. If you've watched the Steelers offense, part of that is definitely the Steelers personnel. Like you're talking about your Russell Wilsons, your Justin Fields, your Aaron Rodgers. Like we're not talking exactly about like the cream of the crop in terms of offensive talent. Offensive line is not good in Pittsburgh, but I do think that his NFL experience, his NFL complexities and wrinkles that he can add to this offense will be beneficial for the Buckeyes, especially with a quarterback like Julian Sand, and obviously future NFLer in Jeremiah Smith. I think that ultimately it's going to push the Buckeyes in a positive direction. Uh, I'm not sure if the college football playoffs going in a positive direction though, and that brings us to our next segment, which is playoffs. You kidding me? Um, the parameters for the 2020 for next year's college football playoff, I almost said 2026. Technically, this was 2026. So 2026, 2027 college football playoff. Um, we're set out. We're not expanding from 12 teams. I'm a big fan of that. Let's start there. I think 12 teams is the right number. I understand with the Notre Dame of it all in this year's college football playoff race, with them getting quote unquote snubbed in favor of Miami. I understand why there might have been a push to expand to 14. Obviously, that's also more revenue for the college football playoff for the school for two more schools that would be involved with that revenue. So like I understand why expansion probably is coming at some point, but I think 12 is a really good number. I think the setup overall beyond the how stretched out the playoff is, like the fact that it lasts essentially an entire month. We had the initial college football playoff first round games on December 19th and the championship on January 19th. So, yeah, actually a full month. I mean, that's a bit egregious. It's only going to get more egregious. I believe the national championship game is actually later next year. Don't like that. especially, I mean, selfishly in, the content business, that's grueling, tiresome for sure. And so I do think that keeping it at 12 teams for right now, though, like I like the format. I like having four teams that earn a bye. I like having the home field of the first round. And you could still have some of that element, especially if you expand to 14, you have two buys, you still have the home field in the first round. But overall, I still think that I favor 12 teams over 14 and 16 as we currently stand. Again, opinions are subject to change, as they always are. The other aspects of this is Notre Dame will get its will. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to get the phrasing right of this. They will be. Actually, let me make sure I have this right. New rules 2026. This is great podcasting. I know you love that. We're going to do Notre Dame. Okay, there we go. Wanted to get the right wording because I don't want to confuse the starters. Sorry. Just trying to help you guys out. Notre Dame will be guaranteed a spot if it finishes ranked in the top 12. Period. Point blank, period. Hate that. Hate that. Um, why are we placating someone who, A, as a program collectively behaved so childishly when they failed to earn an at-large bid, when they are not like they are choosing to be an independent conference. They obviously have been plenty of offers, plenty of potential negotiations to try to get them in multiple different conferences that they've turned down because they want to be able to make their own schedule, do this, that, and the other. You should not be rewarded for that. I'm not saying it should be penalized either. To be clear, there's a middle ground here. And Notre Dame shouldn't be penalized for this. But win the games that you put on your own damn schedule if you're so insistent upon making it. Don't ask for help. Don't, and if you're a college football playoff, like, don't serve Notre Dame's needs over what I would say is the betterment of college football. Because what's going to happen with this, and I don't know if it's going to happen next year, because I actually think Notre Dame's going to be pretty damn good in 2026. So it probably won't be relevant. They'll probably be a top 5 to 6 seed if things go to plan for the Fighting Irish. So again, I don't think it's necessarily going to be that relevant for this year. But you do set yourself up for a future situation where, let's say, we're talking about the 2025 playoff race. Because Notre Dame is essentially guaranteed a spot if they're ranked inside the top 12, which they were, and if we're still talking about automatic qualifiers still getting in, then we're talking, then we're essentially talking about Miami getting left out because Notre Dame has a special rule. Miami played for the national championship. Notre Dame might have too had they made it. Who knows? But what I am saying is that we shouldn't be making special exceptions for Notre Dame. And that's going to move us on to our next topic, which is looking ahead to next season. Mark Schlabach of ESPN, among many others, released his way too early top 25. This one was a bit wild for me, so I'll we kind of wanted to bring it up on the show, and so we're gonna do it Goldilocks style, and that is too hot. I have two teams for each of these. Two teams that are too hot. That Schlabach is too high. Too goodness me. Let's pause. Let's slow down for a second. Two teams that Schlabach is too hot on, two that he's too cold on, and two he has just right. Obviously, there are 25 teams ranked in here. I have opinions on some of the other ones beyond these, but these are kinds of the ones that stood out. We're going to start with too hot, and we're going to start with Indiana. Schlabach has them ranked number one. Now, on one hand, I understand where he's coming from. From our perspective in college football, as content in the content business, there's no reason to doubt Kurt Cignetti. There's no reason to doubt the Hoosiers program at this point. I understand all of that. You're also downgrading at quarterback from Fernando Mendoza to Josh Hoover. You're also downgrading at wide receiver, losing Elijah Serratno, Mark Cooper Jr. Nick Marsh is a great player, but the totality of this doesn't quite add up, I don't think, to what they had in 2025. I think Indiana is going to be a very good football team. I think they have a very real chance to make the playoff in 2026. I think it is exceptionalism and recency bias to have Indiana as the number one ranked team in the country in January. That doesn't make sense to me. I won't, I just can't get there. Another team where I can't just get there, the Louisville Cardinals are ranked 14th. Why? Um, I think Jeff Brom's a hell of a coach. I think that Louisville will probably win 8 to 9 games. There is nothing about this Louisville roster that I look at currently that says that, frankly, they're ranked higher than SMU. I have much more faith in the talent of SMU than I do Louisville. Um, they're 5 spots behind Miami. That feels weird. I don't quite see it with this Louisville team. Um, maybe they're a top 25 caliber team, but opening the season inside the top 15 feels strong, too strong, some might say. And by some, I mean me, because I can't quite get there with them. Moving on to too cold. I think he has the Ohio State Buckeyes at number 6. Now, I understand based off what we saw in the playoff, like why you might be a little trepidatious. You're also, if you're the Buckeyes, you're losing a ton of talent from last year's roster. Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, Carnell Tate, so on and so forth and the like. Caden McDonald, another guy. You are losing quite a bit. You're also bringing back Julian Sand. You're also bringing back Jeremiah Smith. You may be bringing back Bo Jackson. We'll see. Um, but you're bringing back a lot of this core, and it's Ohio State. They've not only hit the transfer portal hard and well, a lot of talented guys. I think the offensive line is going to be a lot better. It was a very young group in 2025, and I think we're going to see some development from that group, which was a weak point from them. And I think that having them at number 6 is a bit reactionary, kind of like Indiana at 1. This feels like a very reactionary top 25. That's probably a word I will use again at some point in this. But Ohio State being at 6 does feel a little reactionary, in my opinion. Um, Kind of going back to what I was talking about with Lane Kiffin and LSU in the portal, LSU is number 15. That's way too cold, in my opinion. First off, you've got them behind Louisville. Brother, if you put the 22 and the 22 on the field for LSU and Louisville, the LSU's winning that game 90% of the time. Like, I'm sorry, like LSU is a far more talented team. And we also know that most of this Ole Miss staff can coach their asses off. We watched them do it in Oxford. Charlie Wise Jr. staying. Lane Kiffin, obviously now in Baton Rouge. I just don't see why LSU is at 15 with the talent that they brought in, with the track record of Lane Kiffin of being such a strong identifier of talent in the portal, and on top of that, with LSU's strong recruiting base. When you factor all that in together, and you think about the addition by subtraction, I would call it, of Brian Kelly, I don't understand why LSU is not getting necessarily the respect they deserve, especially because their portal moves are final. Like Sam Levitt is going to LSU. They're going to have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, throwing a couple of the more talented wide receivers in the country behind an offensive line that should be pretty damn good. Like in a defense that we saw really take a step forward last year. So the more I look at this, the more I don't understand why we're so cold on LSU if you're Mark Schlabach. I did want to mention in this part, Alabama is at 21. I don't hate it because there are some serious questions. We don't know if it's going to be Keelan Russell or Austin Mack, but we do know that's probably a downgrade from what they got from Ty Simpson. Still need to see Alabama run the ball, but it is weird at least seeing Alabama at number 21. Let's go into our just right though, which starting there, Texas Tech at 7 feels exactly right. I'm high on Brennan Sorsby and what he's going to bring to this offense. I think it's going to be an upgrade. Having said that, I do think that the defense does potentially take a step back. Still going to be very good because they have spin again to replenish this defense in the portal. We know that this roster is expensive. We know that there's a ton of talent both in the transfer portal and on their recruiting trail that's coming onto this roster, but it's still somewhat unproven. I think they are a top 10 talented roster probably in the country. I think they're the prohibitive favorite in the Big 12, but I don't think you can get me there to say that they're better than an Ohio State, that they're better than a Georgia, that they're better than a Texas. Hell, they might not even be better than an Indiana. Notre Dame as well in that conversation. I don't think you can quite get me there. I think 7 is about the right spot that I would like to see Texas Tech in based on the improvements that they made this offseason. And the other team that I wanted to mention here was Oklahoma, who I believe is at 12. Hold on, we're scrolling. Yes, 12, Oklahoma. Kind of in the same boat as Texas Tech. This is a team that obviously just made the college football playoff, is losing some, but isn't losing a ton. They brought in some really good transfers. I really like bringing in Parker Livingston from Texas. Not only is it a shot across the Red River rivalry to get bring in a Longhorn there, but I also think it is a good thing to help John Mateer continue developing. Didn't think the Oklahoma wide receivers were anything special last year. I think it will help upgrade that room. I would hope that you would see a leap from Mateer from what we saw last year, especially as he hopefully stays healthy for an entire season. But having said that, not a guarantee. And I think just keeping them as a comfortable top 15 the team in the country is about where they should be based on what we need to see the Sooners still prove, is kind of where I'm coming from with that. And speaking of proving things, you're going to have to prove to Deion Sanders that you were at practice and a whole lot of other things because you missed your mark. And Deion Sanders is about to find Colorado players. We've talked quite a bit about like the professionalization of college sports. And as we talk about the professionalization of college sports, like we're talking about, sorry, one second. We're like, you're talking about obviously paying players. We're talking about the money involved with all this. One of the things that is incongruent with that is because they're still considered student athletes and these contracts with NIL have typically been through businesses, which they will still continue to be in a lot of ways, having some sort of fine structure has not really made sense. So it's almost been that's added to the free-for-all nature of the modern transfer portal. But what Deion Sanders is suggesting here, it's fines for misconduct, and that's what I was looking for. Some fines that are potentially in play. Late to practice, $500. No show, $2,500. Late to film or meeting, $400. No show on that same thing, $2,000. No show in conditioning, $1,500 fine. No show to treatment, $1,500. Violation of team rules, anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. Public or social misconduct, 2 to 5 grand. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like for guys that are making probably, I don't know, like your highest paid players are probably making in the millions of dollars. That's chump change to them, but it is a hit to their pockets. And with the legislation changing with NIL to where the schools are now involved, I do think that frees Colorado and Deion Sanders to do something like this. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not going to pretend to be a legal expert. Far from it, quite frankly. Don't have a lawyer in the family. But I do feel like giving the schools some power when it comes to NIL does allow more accountability for these NIL contracts and what is expected of these players once they sign these deals. And I know we give Deion Sanders in Colorado a lot of flack, and a lot of times deservedly so, in my opinion. Like, we're not just taking pot shots. We just call it like we see it, whether that's with Deion, whether that's with Dabo, whether that's with whoever. We're we're non-discriminatory in who we make fun of, who we poke fun at, who we criticize. I actually like this from Deion Sanders because I do think that with the way Colorado was initially built upon Coach Prime's arrival, there were some concerns that this could get a little out of hand. Shador was part of that. Travis Hunter less so, but he was a big star that kind of did bring the camera there. And it has felt like that some recruits that have gone there have been seeking that same level of spotlight to some degree. And I actually had an interview recently with Cooper Manning, Arch's dad, and was talking a lot. We talked a good bit for Fansided about player development and what's changed in the NIL era. And one of the things he said was that a lot of young players are not enamored with the with development anymore and being developed. Given what we saw from Colorado last year, I wonder how much that is the case, and I wonder how much these measures are to kind of combat that. And more importantly, I wonder how many programs across the country we're going to start seeing this from, or just throwing this out there, I wonder how many programs are actually already doing this, because that would be the real interesting thing. Because maybe Coach Prime is a pioneer in this and he's the first to try this or do this. Maybe it's already been happening. We'll see. I'm sure that'll come out at some point, but this is, fresh news with Colorado and Deion Sanders. But I did find it quite interesting, and I think it's a positive for Colorado in the long run, and I think it could be positive for a lot of other programs in the long run as well. And that's going to bring us to our last one, our last segment of the day. If Deion Sanders finds a player, he's going to walk up to him and say, "Where's the money, Lebowski?" And that's with schools potentially getting more revenue from college sports because the NCAA has approved jersey patch advertisement logos starting on August 1st, 2026. So basically, right before the college football season, we will likely see ads on a lot of college football jerseys for the 2026 season. I think, as someone who I do like a jersey, I do appreciate the clean look of not having the advertisement on there. In terms of schools creating more revenue, this is smart. This was coming for a long time, and it's a smart way to do it, man. And I think where it could be really beneficial is when we're talking about smaller or less resource P4 schools and G5 schools. I think that's where this is going to be really important because it is going to draw in advertising revenue and advertising dollars for these programs to then turn and invest into their programs, invest into the athletic administration, and invest into their team if it's college football that we're talking about here. I think about someone like a Tulsa. And I'm not saying Tulsa's going to bring in bukus of dollars and turn their entire program around, but it'll give them a fighting chance if you're able to add some more revenue to the bottom line. And I think that's what this is going to do. I haven't mentioned this to Bueller yet, but I think that on a soon coming show, I don't know if it will be the midweek show or if it'll be once I get back from San Francisco covering the Super Bowl. Um, I think he and I should go through and pick some advertisers that would be perfect for a lot of these college football programs. Most of them are mostly probably going to be jokes, but nonetheless, I think that's what we should do. It sounds like a good time. But on the whole, this is a big change for college sports, but I do think it's a positive change because of what it can mean trickling down. Not like Ohio State having something on their jersey doesn't mean anything. If Georgia has Coca-Cola or whatever the hell, or Terrapin Brewing or whatever on their jersey, it's not going to dramatically change much there, except for adding a little bit of money to the bottom line of the program, which is already, making money hand over fist. But for the programs that are not doing that, that are struggling to maybe even break even in some cases, I do think this could be hugely impactful. And I am intrigued to see what patches we do get in some of these jerseys. You know what? Going back to where we start, where an earlier segment, maybe we get the FedEx patch on the Ohio State jersey since Arthur Smith's there. Who knows? But this was episode 245 of False Start. You can follow me, Cody Williams, on Twitter or the X at TheSizzle20. You can follow Bueller at Bueller118. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Please rate, review, subscribe, listen, interact with us. Subscribe on YouTube. Give us 5 stars on Apple or Spotify, wherever podcasts are found. We love you guys. We love doing this show. Let's hope we don't get fined because we're committing penalties every day because this is false start.